the public for that, for the public hearing for that. No? No comments or?
Comments?
No?
You close the hearing?
Okay, I can close then the public hearing. And I just called this meeting to order, and we'll start with our pledge to the flag in front of us. And we will all do this together. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is Luann coming, or are we supposed to call her?
She's supposed to come, was it? Where?
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Ives.
Here.
Ms. Bickus.
Here.
Ms. Johnson. Mr. Lewandowski. Present. Ms. Lopez Caniva.
Here.
Dr. Veronica Shaw. Michael Travis. All right.
Okay, we'll start with our resolutions with the AP student recognition for classes of 2020, 2021, and 2022. So I'm going to read them.
You can go ahead, you can add if you'd like me to.
Sure, I can read
Alright.
the resolution here. All right, tonight we recognize the efforts and academic achievement of 197 Lockport Township High School students from the classes of 2020, 2021, and 2022, whose performance within the Advanced Placement Program has resulted in recognition as AP Scholars by the College Board. Awards are given to high school students who have demonstrated college-level achievement through AP courses and exams. This honor was awarded to them in July, and we wanted to honor them closer to the time of the award and not wait until the new year when this group of students has historically been acknowledged. In the future, we would love to AP Scholars present at the board meeting, as this is a huge accomplishment. Unfortunately, this is not possible because the many students that receive this honor for exceeds the CDC guidelines for gatherings. To receive AP Scholar recognition, a student must receive a score of 3 or higher on 3 or more advanced placement exams. The College Board recognizes students as advanced placement scholars with honor, advanced placement scholars with distinction, and advanced placement national scholars. So here is the resolution. Whereas the following students have excelled on the advanced placement examination and have received award status as determined by the College Board, and thereby bringing honor and distinction to their families, schools, and communities. Now therefore be resolved by the Board of Education, Township High School District 205, Will County, Illinois, that the following student from the classes of 2020, 2021, and 2022 are hereby recognized for their outstanding academic achievement on the advanced placement exams. And as you
Do you want
can
to
see,
take a vote to accept that resolution?
yes, I make a motion.
Second.
It's been motion.
I'll second it.
Been motioned by Mr. Ives and seconded by Ms. Bickus.
All right. Take the roll call. Mrs. Bickus.
Yes.
Mr. Ives.
Yes.
Mr. Lewandowski.
Yes.
Dr. Veronica Shaw.
Yes.
Mrs. Lopez Caniva.
Yes.
We'll give Mrs. Johnson a chance to get settled there.
Yes.
Yes. All right. And the motion passes.
Motion passes.
Nice job by the AP Scholars. It's great.
Thank you. Congratulations to those students. Student government report, there is none.
No. Yeah.
All right, AFT report, Ms. Karen Cooper.
I guess this is like the Inquisition underneath the table here. Is this on?
It is.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I know I was quiet for how many meetings, and so I'm just a couple things that I want to talk about. First off, I would like to acknowledge all the hard work that went into creating a hybrid plan that was sustainable, and I'm hopeful that we will get to return to it at some point. I cannot thank this school board and administration enough for support with regards to safety, which was my biggest concern. The district administration worked tirelessly locating appropriate PPE for students and staff, creating new building and classroom setup plans to follow social distancing recommendations, coordinating transportation routes, communicating with learning community. Staff members also were able to work collaboratively on these efforts by serving on committees, providing input for education, training, and safety of students, fellow staff members, and the community. For all the work that was done, we, as loyal staff members, were on board. I, for one, was looking forward to seeing students. I have to tell you, today was like the best day I've had in about 4 months of life. I don't know any other way to put it, but it was so nice to be with those kids. I missed it. It was sheer joy. So the kids in my classroom in the hallways, they were pretty good. I just thought I would share with you my observations because those were concerns. From the kids that I had in my classroom, they wore their masks. A couple kids in the hallways, I kind of had to say, hey, pull it up over your nose. My supervision is down in the cafeteria where we had the 3 different groups, kind of, and the spacing there went well also. So there were a lot of good things that came out of our hybrid model and the work that has happened. I will say the hallways are still a little scary to maneuver, but the kids were good. I can't complain about that. It's unfortunate, though, that we've had to return to the remote learning with the new IDPH guidelines, which makes it impossible for us to sustain this model. But again, it's in the name of safety. So this staff is flexible. I just want to remind you that. We've proven it before. The past spring, we adapted on the fly to a whole new structure. Thanks to the dedicated members of the tech department and your support. We have all that hardware, software, training, and we can take on virtual instruction no matter where we are. As I mentioned at the last board meeting, teachers were clocking hours longer than normal, all right? The willingness is there to help the students out. So in talking to staff in other districts, again, this district did more for its students than any district that I've spoken to. I don't know any other way to put it, and I'm proud to represent these Porters. So we've continued to assess our ability to work from home during summer school when teachers worked from home and taught students that had struggles in the spring. There were successes and there were lack of successes, admittedly. But there's data that shows that it can work. One of the science teachers that taught summer school said, I kept those kids in a Google Meet the whole time. It went well. I had the internet that worked well. I had a good background. These were the repeater kids. These are the kids that aren't successful. It wasn't 100% perfect, but it went well and they learned. She thought that it was pretty good for kids coming off of spring learning where they hadn't even been required to attend Google Meets that were set. So as a staff, we're willing to improve with the knowledge gained from these experiences. And the quick turnaround time has kind of caught us off guard. I think that we've been sitting in meetings talking about how to make the hybrid model work, and we have not sat down and had conversations about the remote model because we put so much time and effort into this hybrid model. And again, we were on board. So shame on me for not having the foresight to try to bring up some of the discussion that needed to be had. As we worked through every detail on the steering committee, we did not get to this particular one since we were concentrating again on the hybrid model. But this is a change in working conditions, and our staff members we need to address this properly, okay? So I just want to take a moment just to discuss some points that are out there about staff being required to be in the building if that is a decision that is made, okay? I don't know where everybody stands on it, but I would just like to bring out a couple points. First, it's been wonderful that Mr. Kandari has been flexible in working with members who have health concerns and parents with child care concerns. He's been great. It definitely makes sense to allow those teachers with child care issues to work from home. Otherwise, they're forced to take expanded FMLA under the Family First Cares Act. They can only take up to the 12 weeks of intermittent time, and it's 2/3 pay. If that is what has to happen, then those people basically would need some type of coverage for remote teaching, and it would cost the district, and it would be shortages. But that hasn't happened. We've been flexible here, and I have appreciated that. And so due to the new IDPH guidelines, what we're seeing now is that there are more schools that are turning remote. And so parents that thought they had childcare, it's disappearing on them, okay? So we have some issues in that particular area. Also, the stringent guidelines put forth by IDPH kind of caused the staff to continually quarantine for minor symptoms, in which case they're teaching remotely anyway in those cases. So Staff members with documented health concerns, like I said, they've been taken care of. Thank you. It's appreciated. There's still a risk and fear, though. So just because students aren't in the building does not mean that there is no risk. So if IDPH has changed its guidelines because of elevated concerns, then there's still some concern for people that have underlying health issues or loved ones at home that make it uncomfortable for them to want to be in the building, even if they don't have a doctor's note to talk about it. So on top of that, there's the chance that we could revert back to phase 3, and watching the numbers, there's a good chance. So working through some of these details now would benefit us for a return to phase 3. And then there are logistical concerns. I kind of was talking with Trish Sherman today and Jen Webray, like, do we have enough space where a teacher has a place that they can work out of if everybody's in the building? Because we do have some space issues. So just some things that have come up and some current concerns. But at the end of the day, staff want to do the job that they were assigned. They don't want to have to give up. They just want some flexibility. If the requirements of a person's job can be done from home, and it is difficult for a person to attend in person, then they should be able to have the option to work from home. There will be people whose role makes it more necessary for them to be in the building because they provide special services. Maybe they're teaching the special tech-based classes like auto, or providing some intervention services for students or working with some of the special populations. But having a reduced size in the staff population actually makes it safer for those groups to be in the building, okay? So basically, in an effort to address the above issues, we're just hopeful that the board would consider allowing teachers to have the option of working in the building or working from home. I, for one, I want to work in the building. I'm hopeful that if I work in the building, then I can set some boundaries to my day, and I'm not doing the 10 to 12-hour days that I was doing in the spring. I'm thinking that might be the way to go. But I'm also hopeful that we don't have to return back to phase 3 where we can't get in the building. So if we don't get the chance to return to hybrid learning, or if we do get the chance, the staff knows that they're going to be expected to be in person according to the hybrid model with the same flexibility for those people that we have already worked with. We have become extremely flexible in our jobs. With the support of the administration and our tech department, we have risen to that occasion, and we really would just appreciate flexibility and response. We're hoping for flexibility to keep our educators where they belong and where they want to be, whether that is physical or virtual classroom in Lockport Township High School. So thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Cooper. All right. IASB Governing Board Report.
There's nothing on the horizon for IASB. The only thing I've seen recently was there's a CUBE online CUBE online virtual conference coming. It's September, like middle of September. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
That's all I have.
That's all. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Foundation Board Report.
Yes, after a brief summer break, the foundation reconvened early August and they'll continue to have our monthly meetings throughout the school year. Janine continues to do a great job shepherding all the activity that's going on between the, well, non-activity unfortunately,
Yes.
because right now the foundation's in a difficult spot. You know, the foundation's looking at taking this time to reassess, you know, how we want to do things. I mean, it's gone from difficult to almost impossible to run fundraising events in this year, so we're not sure how that is going to, so we're going to take a look and re-look at the foundation itself. The team is still looking at coming up with a new role of the executive director and how that's going to be done, how it's going to be paid for between the school board and the foundation and things like that. The sit-go activity that was tied to various activities and fundraisers has gone a little quiet. But you know, it's gonna, you know, next couple months, it's gonna take some, you know, some retooling. I think, you know, get some new members, because I think some of the existing members are burnt out a little, and going forward with that. So it's still very solid, and there's a solid core, but we just have to look at, you know, doing things a little differently and changing things up, and, you know, Janine's so busy with everything else, so giving her some support, and then we can kinda look at the way we do things and systems and procedures, so that's really where it stands right now.
All right, okay, well, thank you. All right, legislative report.
Yeah, probably the two most important school-related legislative issues were kind of two things that caught us as a board off guard. July 20th was the last time we met, and then shortly after that, on July 23rd, a new set of Illinois State Board of Education guidelines for reopening schools were released on July 23rd, right after we met. So many of the things that you'll see in the final form of the return to school transition plan tonight reflect the requirements that you'll see in here, or guidelines or suggestions. It's a little bit more layered report in that it has guidance, which is required. It has recommendations and suggestions, which are recommendations and suggestions. So it's one part directives, one part, here are some ways to structure learning that the State Board of Education requests. And then, as Mrs. Cooper mentioned, for superintendents everywhere and boards everywhere, we received the surprise Illinois Department of Public Health additional guidance as of August 12th, 2020, last Wednesday. And two things were happening. We were told by our regional office of education that the regional directors of public health were working on a document that would give metrics, as Mrs. Cooper indicated, about, is it, based on what's happening in the community, is it safe to go back into schools? They were working on that. The state took a look at things from the symptom point of view. So two very different approaches to the same issue. Obviously, the State Department of Health is going to trump the county directors of health as they were looking at it. Incidentally, under the county directors of health, based on what's happening right now, where the metrics are in Will County, in the 2 zip codes that we serve, we would be in a hybrid situation based on the hospitalization rate, the turnaround of testing rate, the morbidity rate, the positivity rate, and the infection rate. The IDPH guidelines at the symptom level put a layer of response to symptoms that an organization our size simply could not bear. We could wait to see how these symptoms would impact our staff. We could wait to see how these symptoms impacted students. But based on all the metrics that we've seen in the past, patterns of attendance by our staff getting, it's very common, regardless of all the protection we're wearing right now, for our staff to come back and experience mild things like colds, maybe a simple onset of flu, maybe strep throat, allergies. Staff who presented with any of those COVID-like symptoms, runny nose, headache, stomach ache, cough, would be asked to stay at home for 10 days under these guidelines, or get a negative COVID-19 test, one or the other. Similarly, students, and we usually have, once the school year gets rolling, we have about 80 at the low end to 200 students a day that go to our nurses' offices, and what they present with is usually on the list of COVID-like symptoms. We had 2 students who came to the nurse's office today and reported they both had a headache and wanted to go home. Well, those students found out that they need to be at home for 10 days or a negative COVID test. Obviously, they are going to be home for 10 days. Additionally, we had to take a look if they have any siblings at East or Central, because those students too would have to be home even though they were asymptomatic. In essence, what these new guidelines ask us to do is treat any symptom as if the person has COVID, which, given the number of our staff members, and that's not just our teachers, that's custodial, maintenance, office professional, paraprofessional, dean's assistant, and then just the volume of our students, really the impact of this was to make it almost unbearable, and you've probably as board members seen that impact as the final high school districts, Hinsdale Central and South, Downers Grove, North and South, my own community, Wheaton, and then obviously our districts just found that it was not something that we could move forward with. Some member of the community have corresponded with me and said, well, why didn't you wait until you saw these symptoms? You know, why not wait till staff had to be out the 10 days, students had to be out the 10 days, and that, you know, hardly seemed like a plan. So a very major impact on our district. What I would say to board members, I don't want to steal the thunder of our principals, is, and Mrs. Cooper already spoke to it, it was a very successful day. Lots to tune up, not perfect, almost no school day ever is, but really a model of how we can live with COVID-19 and still do things like school. But regrettably, once we looked at how things would go with 1,400 students in this building, 500 students at Central and East, just not something that we would ultimately be able to keep up with. So let's hope that the regional directors of public health and the state directors of public health can have a meeting of the minds and maybe provide us some guidance sooner rather than later that reconciles these 2 points of view. I don't know if there's any board member questions on the IDPH guidelines.
You said based on, you said today you had 2 students that said they had a headache.
Yeah,
So they were sent home?
they were, Luann, and these guidelines require us to treat them as if though they have COVID.
Okay.
So let's say we continued on our hybrid model. We would have to tell those families that those students and their siblings would have to be home for 10 days or until they demonstrated a negative COVID test.
So would they be online?
They would have to go online somehow because if they were healthy, obviously they needed to take a sick day. So then they would have to go online, right? And we put our teachers in a situation of teaching the students in front of them, but then also increasing students that are, you know, teaching students who are at home as well. Now, we do have a model for that in the hybrid, but it would mean that those students would totally lose the in-person piece. It also is complicated for many of our families too, because we don't know. These days, it is quicker, more rapid if through your physician you can get a COVID test, which is expensive, and if you don't have health care, you're paying out of pocket for that. The state testing has been delayed and has sometimes not even produced results.
I have to witness to that.
Yeah, and that's, you know, just stating what it is, so you could see how that would be very difficult for families. And then the similar, different kinds of difficulty for staff members.
So we had, over the last 2 days, oh well, just only one day,
Yeah, it was just today.
we had half the kids here.
We did.
And how was the passing in the hall?
You know, I think the hallways remain, you know, a place to tune up, because the number one thing, and you've probably seen this at Jewel or Walmart, is following the one-way signs.
Okay.
The biggest difficulty we had is the CDC guidelines to get everyone moving in the same direction is the best way to reduce infection. And they just had a hard time navigating that. Once they got it, and our dean's assistants were out in the hallways, and I know that Dr. Green and Dr. Green will talk about that extensively, they began to understand the up stairway, the down stairway. It was just the first day of school, you know, looking down. Probably my guess is we need signs that are up, right? So. But the key from the CDC guidelines in a situation like hallways is that students keep moving. And what we really worked on the most today is no congregating. So never in my 32 years of public high schooling have I ever seen a school day where high school students never hung out. You know, our whole goal was we didn't want clumps of kids standing with each other and visiting. And the staff did a tremendous job at both places of they were like shepherds. And as usual, I'm always amazed how students get it. They get it. A reasonable request, hey, you guys need to move along, separate out, kind of keep moving. They get it. But I think Mrs. Cooper was very accurate in that there's some work you know, if we ever come back, there's some work to do.
What about the lunchtime?
Today, we did not serve lunch.
Okay.
So no one ate lunch because this week, you know, our plan was not to have quite lunch yet. We wanted to make sure that that's, you know, having students take masks off and now eat in an enclosed space. We want to make sure that students really understood our lunch procedure. So the plan was to explain that today, explain that Thursday, and then start that next week. Just sort of a safe and a smart start. That is my legislative report.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just have one more.
Sure.
By doing what we did today, are we violating any of the CDC rules? No?
We are not.
Okay.
You know, we followed, Mr. Thompson's done just an, you know, extraordinary job. All the protocols, what we were trying to do is avoid what's called close contact, keep things 6 feet apart, keep masks up, you know. Kids were great, you know, we really asked kids to keep their mask up, covering their nose and covering their mouth. They were great. We asked people, the CDC does not want advices against masks with vents, bandanas, or these things called gaiters. We saw very, very few. So all of those things in terms of spacing and those protocols and hand sanitizing, and you know, I was in a lot of classrooms today. I saw kids pump in, pump out with hand sanitizer. So, and teachers were great. I mean, teachers really used their time to kind of say, this is what we have to do to keep each other safe.
Thank you. All right, moving on, communications.
We received an email that I'm going to read. It says, "Good evening, Dr. McBride, Dr. Greenan, Dr. Green, and Ms. Lopez-Caneva. We wanted to take a moment to thank you and your staff for all you have done for the seniors these past several months. With each day passing this spring, it seemed as though the seniors were missing another scheduled event. However, LTHS repeatedly re-envisioned each event to make sure those days were very special. The surprises kept coming from the virtual top 10 dinner, Dr. McBride and Dr. Ives' visit to congratulate Jessica on her scholarships, trying to reschedule prom, the graduation day parade, and of course, culminating in the most special graduation ceremony, all while you were managing e-learning as well. We know this was not an easy task, and a lot of thought and preparation went into each event. By doing this, you helped Jessica have closure on her high school years and all the hard work she put in academically and athletically. And for that, we are very grateful. In addition to giving Jessica the closure, you have also provided closure to us as parents, as well as we look back on the last 7 years our kids have collectively spent at LTHS. A sincerest thanks to all of you and your team, John and Elaine Ramirez. Class of 2020 and 2017 were her children, Jessica and Marissa. So on top of that, I know I always read the communications. I would also like to send a heartfelt thank you to the administration and staff who have graciously sent condolences for the passing of my grandparents, so I really appreciate that. You know, I read these every week, and I always think, oh, you know, it's great, the administration's doing a really nice job, but from the bottom of my heart, like, I never thought that I would get that flood of well wishes, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, freedom of information requests, we had, let's see, 3 of them, and I think from your board packet, all of them were fulfilled. So, but thank you for that. All right, next is public comments. A designated portion of the board meeting is set aside to hear comments on topics listed on the agenda. A person wishing to speak must sign in and provide all information requested on the sign-in sheet, including the agenda item they will be addressing. The board president will call speakers up by name, announcing their time to comment. A time limit of 5 minutes per speaker per agenda topic will be imposed. The purpose of requesting such information on the sign-in sheet is to obtain the correct spelling of the name of the speaker and contact information, which would be used for any necessary board follow-up. And there is none. And all right, just next is the approval of our regular meeting minutes of July 20th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been motioned by Mr. Ives and second by Dr. Shaw. Are there any questions or additions or corrections to those meeting minutes? Okay. Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Ives.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Lewandowski,
Abstain.
Dr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mrs. Bickus,
Yes.
Mrs. Lopez Caniva.
Yes. Next, we have the approval of the closed session meeting minutes of July 20th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
I make the motion.
Second.
It's been motioned by Ms. Bickus and second by Mr. Ives. Are there any questions or additions or corrections to those closed session minutes? All right, hearing none, then roll call.
Mr. Lewandowski,
Abstain.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Ives,
Yes.
Dr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mrs. Bickus,
Yes.
Mrs. Lopez Caniva.
Reports, all those reports that you see there on your board packet. Again, thank you, Ms. Stewart. Thank you. Okay, no,
A lot of work.
A lot of work, and thank you
in
for
Mrs.
this,
Croy's
yes.
office.
Nice job.
All right, okay. Hearing nothing, then, just need a roll call.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Bickus,
Yes.
Dr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Lewandowski,
Yes.
Mr. Ives,
Yes.
Mrs. Lopez Caniva.
Yes. Thank you. All right, moving on to the superintendent update.
All right. COVID-19 dominated the summer, so I decided let's put some non-COVID-19 items on the superintendent report. It's a good reminder that there is a world outside of this, and I don't know if anybody here has had a dinner or a sit down or a discussion with someone where they could not talk about what is happening. But just a few highlights. Congressional art competition. This is a really neat thing. This is a national program. Each congressman participates in it if she or he would like to. Congressman Representative Dan Lipinski does. And in his jurisdiction, in his district, our student Eliana Anselmo, she was the winner this year. So her work, Worried About the Wrong Masks, will be displayed in the Capitol complex in Washington for 1 year. So that's neat to have the Lockport name there in the Capitol. Also, we had 2 academic challenge winners who earlier this year, Zach Glowinski and Matthew Stonis. Those are names you might have recognized. We honored them last year. They placed first and second in engineering graphics. Grace Galfano placed third in English at sectionals. At state, Matt Stonis went on to place first for the second year in a row. We acknowledged him last year. And then Zach placed second. We'll probably be doing a resolution. We might even have a student in here in person. I just have to tell you, a number of us, I know Mrs. Cristofero, I believe Dr. Greenan. I think Dr. Greenan and I were perhaps a little embarrassed by our Argonne team, feeling that maybe we're not really doctors, because we had a presentation from Karen Murphy and Bill Kane and a team of students who spent all last year at Argonne National Laboratory working with international scientists on international research. And it was probably halfway through when we were talking about density and high density and looking at calculations. It was a virtual presentation to us as a panel. That's when I think Dr. Greenan and I maybe were worried about our doctoral status. It was excellent. It was just one of those moments where you transcended so far beyond, all the kind of things that we do with grades and really to just the highest levels of learning, and to see our students side by side in a national way with just people who are world-renowned scientists. It was amazing. So hats off to Bill Kane and Karen Murphy, because they just labor of love all year to make that happen. Over the summer, we had 780 athletes complete camps successfully. Another kind of good sign that we can do this. So much of that goes to our coaching staff. Really phenomenal, very quickly getting right with new procedures, keeping kids safe, keeping themselves safe. And Mike Dwyer and his staff, really outstanding, a lot to them. Really want to appreciate Mr. Kandari. You're always reminded things still happen, things go on. We had 18 new staff members. It's always great to see that people will come and join us. They want to join us. They want to join education, even though we're in this very unusual time. It was just an outstanding orientation. So congratulations to Mr. Kandari and his staff. And then I just listed all of the people who were kind enough to lend their time and present, in your agenda. So you can see all of those people over 3 days who really did it. I have to say, freshman orientation and welcome back days, that was another test for us. I congratulated Dr. Green. She said it is a team, and that is true. And the same with welcome back days. Much like today's school day, were there some things that we had to adjust? Did we have some mask issues, some congregating? But just in both cases, there were so many staff ready to do that it was very, very smooth. We had 3,300 plus people come through in 4 days. So real testament to our principals and their staffs and secretarial staff. I could, you'll be here late if I congratulate everyone. I want to thank Mrs. Cristofero. We've only been remote with our department chairs for a long time. She did a very nice job on Friday, pulling all of our department leaders together. Just really excellent to get the year academically kicked off, whatever platform we're in. And then finally, just the Opening Institute days. I think it started on a high. We had a gentleman, Paul Farmer, that came in, building administrators, Angel Huntington, Dave Needesball, all did great jobs with their staff. Paul Farmer was great. We loved his approach, where it wasn't, hey, I'm gonna, talk to you to death. He put our staff in pods all over the building, and they really worked as a total professional learning community, as a campus, but then in particular teams. I'd love to at some point have some time to pick Mrs. Kishline's mind and pick Mrs. Cooper's mind. Just was that a productive day? The goal was, Paul Farmer's goal was, at the end of the day, to have people feel like they had planned, almost 4 weeks with their team, at least have that template. Always good to get feedback from Paul about us. He's someone who goes out nationally. Very impressed with our staff, very impressed with the level of commitment, level of professionalism, but most impressed with the way that people were treating each other. The second day, just excellent as well. We have a Student Equity Action Committee that is up and running. You might remember in June, we had our Equity Action Adult Committee, talked about that as a vision. We have a group of students, really phenomenal. They did a presentation to our staff, very well received. We were just really impressed by students presenting to our staff. And then our grading committee presented on some recommendations that it adopted, as well as Tony Kandari did a great job. We just think right now is really a time to talk to our staff about the employee assistance program. A lot of isolation, a lot of, there are mental health issues for adults. And we can help with that. Dr. Green and Dr. Green presented as well. And then I came in to share the not so great news about where we're at with the IDPH guidelines. So that is my report.
Anyone have any questions?
Anything I can answer?
No?
Our diversifying our narrative student equity action committee, they'd probably be asking board members to take the pledge. So I'll sweat your appetite with that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Maybe let them do the talking sometime.
Are they gonna present to us?
That would be great, man. Yeah, that would be good down the line for them to bring in their
Even
presentation.
if it's virtually?
And they can do it here. We would be within the limit, So it'd be nice to have them in person. I think you'd really appreciate that.
So how many students do we have?
We started with 2, it grew to 6, and now they're recruiting. If you're online, you have Instagram or Twitter, they are DON LTHS. Very sophisticated Twitter and Instagram feed.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the consent agenda items. I just need a motion for the approval of the consent agenda items.
I motion to move to approve the consent agenda items as stated.
I can second that. Are there any questions to those consent agenda items? All right, hearing none, then I think we'll just take a roll call.
Mrs. Bickus,
Yes.
Mr. Lewandowski,
Yes.
Mr. Ives,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Dr. Shaw.
Think about that.
Yes.
and Mrs. Lopez Caniva.
Yes.
I guess I did have a question.
Okay.
I'll come back around.
Next, action consideration, the approval of the return of school transition plan.
Board members have, you have in your folder, and you also have online, whichever you prefer, the return to school transition plan. And this is the plan that, the beginning, the seed of this plan was Mrs. Cooper and I had a dialogue the very first week of May, and that came out of our work with we were weekly meeting with students, and said, school will start again, and we have a pandemic flu policy 4:180 that calls for the superintendent to pull together a committee in the case of pandemic flu in order to address the procedures and processes. So that was the beginning, and as we summarized last time that we were together, we really spent all summer in 5 task force committees. The committees were comprised of administrative leaders, staff members, members that I asked Mrs. Cooper to contribute if they would volunteer from our union, and those were all sorts of members, facilities people, custodians, office professionals, not just our teaching staff. Presented to you a draft on July 20th, and now coming to you with a final. So that board members understand kind of the front of this with the resolution, what the resolution is asking you to do, that I'll ask, eventually, after just sharing with you some updates to this plan and taking your questions and engaging my colleagues with answers that they've developed. The resolution really does 2 things that are helpful for the board. One, it drapes over all of your policies and procedures, and the word in the resolution is it resolves any potential conflict between board policies and procedures with things that we have to do based on the CDC or the IDPH. And in essence, resolves of those. It's almost like an emergency declaration. So that is one action the board's taking. The second action that the board's taking with this resolution is approving or embracing the tools in this resolution. We will have to use many different tools this year. Today we use the tool of hybrid in-person learning. Thursday we'll have to use the tool of remote learning. We have a tool for families of completely working online. Families who have elected that they do not want to come in at all. We have the tool of providing an athletics program because the IHSA is still providing that. And we have the tool of still providing an activities program because the IHSA is doing that. So in essence, what the board is approving is the use of the tools and empowering the superintendent under the current emergency order to use these tools in the toolbox, in essence. The plan is not required under current state law and state school code for the board to approve it, but I think it's good policy for the board to weigh in on it, for sure. I also think that the board's support behind it assists us with every issue from policy to reliability. There's a number of things in here that we embrace that I think are important. I'm going to pause there just for any questions. What I was going to do is just walk you through this packet and highlight what is different from the last time that you saw it. Luann. So first, if I could just get your attention on page 3. Page 3, a little bit halfway down, and page 3 begins furthermore. We did embrace a plan. The guidelines on July 23rd required us to provide families, for whatever reason, a fully online option. Previously, when I presented to you, I presented a plan that said any student who was medically fragile or at risk. We had done a survey of about 200 families had responded that they felt they were medically fragile or they had an at-risk condition. On July 23rd, the state said, you have to offer that to any student who requests it. We put that together. I'll talk about that in a little bit more into the packet. But we've provided that. We have about 220 families who have sought to enroll in that. In essence, those families either are medically at risk, fragile medically, have at a risk person in their home, or families just don't feel comfortable being in an in-person environment. And please, I'll be looking at people, just stop me, if there's a question, because no intent to present and just move past your question.
So this is for a semester, right?
It is for a semester, Mrs. Johnson, and then a little bit later in, I'll highlight for you kind of all the bullet points of that
Well, I
program.
guess my question is, so after the semester is done,
Mm-hmm.
what happens?
When the semester ends, my guess will be that we will have to, this year, and where we're at with this virus, my guess is that we will have to continue offering that option, a fully online option. We've invested in that now, we've staffed that now, we've sort of built that architecture with that anticipation. Could I see, is it possible that public health directors somehow in December tell us that second semester we can return to in-person learning fully? I would be surprised. Will perhaps these families might change their mind, and if we're in hybrid learning, select a different option? But we would revisit this option for families again. Their commitment to it is only a semester, just because we don't have a crystal ball.
What if we get to second semester, and some other families say, I'm not liking this remote environment?
Right, we
Can
wouldn't,
I
that's
go
a
to
great
the other
question.
one?
The July 23rd guidelines indicate that we would have to offer that. And so we are set up, to offer that. It's about 7% of our population has selected that. That was consistent all summer when we did town halls and we polled our parents. We were always polling from June until August that about 88 to 89% of our families wanted some kind of in-person learning. So, great questions. Page 6, I just added 2 events. A town hall meeting that we held on July 29th with any family that was interested in the fully online platform. And then on August 3rd, we had a meeting with our parent focus group in order to dialogue with them one last time about our plan. Last time we came to you, this is page 7, we did not have the alphabetical split. 2 people, this little simple footnote, LTHS group, this is page 7, last names A through LA. Porter group, last names LB through Z. It just seems simple, a nice little footnote, but believe me, behind that is hours that I can't even calculate of work by one of our assistant principals, Jen Webb-Ray, and another assistant principal, Trish Sermon, with a lot of help from Matt Bartley too. And today, every classroom I walked into had the kind of balance that they created by creating this split. I have never seen, it's kind of one interesting thing I've never seen in my 32 years of public high school where high school teachers were in classrooms of 8, 10, 12, unless it was a very specialized program. On page 8 and 9, this is the final hybrid schedule that we landed on for the first 6 weeks. In working with our union, this is kind of the structure, but we did not go out to Columbus Day and other holidays because we just wanted to see how this 6 weeks went first. And so you can kind of see that this is the final form of what we proposed. We were lucky. There are 2 things you'll see. We'll talk about this when we look at a revised calendar for the school year. On Wednesday, the 19th, after a conversation I had with Mrs. Cooper about a week ago, we just felt we needed additional planning for our teachers. And then we also inserted another remote learning planning day on September 8th. An interesting piece of that is that's a full planning day for staff members, but the state counts that as a day of student attendance, even though students are not in attendance. So students are not.
Online doing work or something? So
They are not. So the intention of those days are pure planning days for teachers. And so that's a pure planning day on the 19th and then one on the 8th. So that's in order to kind of reset and what Mrs. Cooper mentioned earlier, get ready for this, full remote learning. And, just from my classroom experience, from my experience right now, teaching, I would just leave it to say that I believe remote learning, teaching is difficult. Teaching 5 classes a day, challenging in person. But there's so much in person that we're able to do as human beings that when it's fully virtual or fully remote, very challenging. Most people would tell you, I took a class, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, just a full weekend class on developing online lessons with 2 experts. And most people would tell you that preparing a good virtual lesson takes you 4 times what it takes to prepare one live lesson. And these were 2 experts in the field. Dr. McBride himself is experiencing this because at North Central College, I have to prepare all of my lessons in person and I have to prepare them online. So I have to do both. And the online takes far more to do it right, to do it well. Kind of moving forward, kind of moving ahead. Last time we met, page 12, we did not have our in-person plan for symptom screening and hybrid and self-certification. The details are there. Our staff every morning at 4 a.m. receive an email that asks them to self-certify. You have in your folder, appendix, I believe it's H, that are the questions that were asked. That requirement to self-certify creates an issue with the IDPH guidelines because if a staff member takes it and tells Mr. Kandari, I am not well enough to come to school, with the IDPH guidelines, Mr. Kandari would have to follow up and say, what were your symptoms that you were not well enough? Would that provoke people to be not exactly honest or truthful about their own symptoms? Possibly, right? With temperature screenings, I'm sure that Dr. Green and Dr. Greenan will talk about how that went this morning. My own visual observation, we did decide that we would temperature screen our students. Very dignified, very fluid, very smooth, very efficient. Our new health aides did a great job. Our school nurse did a great job. Our dean's assistants did a great job. In a dignified way, we did have a number of students who had a temperature that we had to retest them. Hey, why don't you sit down? Kind of just be still, just hang on for a few minutes. Let's just see. And that went very, very well. Let me just pause on that. That's an important safety procedure. The self-certification would continue if any staff, do come into the building to work during the remote period, and any students. Okay. Page 14, what I've added is the athletics program and the activities program. These are 2 tools that I think are awfully important. We can, and we have had a lot of success with our sports camps, and the IHSA is going to run a sports season. Also with activities, our activities director, Brian Lessner, has worked with many of our activity sponsors, done an excellent job at plotting out and planning out how we can do everything from our Porter players to some of our smaller clubs in a safe way, primarily in an online way. I think this is so important for us to keep students connected to their school and to provide activities for them after school. There is a big change in season here. This directly relates to a question that Mr. Ives raised last time we were together about our contract with ATI for athletic training. I did share in board member questions and in a few updates that Mr. Kandari did conclude a rider that should IHSA sports be canceled or severely diminished, that we would, in a complimentary way, have a reduction in the fee that we paid to ATI, pardon me. But one of the things I would argue is that as we go throughout this year, offering, even if the IHSA says we're not going to have a competition season, offering students camps, rec camps, keeps team continuity, keeps kids connected to each other and their coaches. Really important for the culture of the district in our buildings.
What does this do for I know some of the sports, they move to the spring.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this do to kids who normally do 2 sports a year?
That is a very good question, Mrs. Johnson. The IHSA, usually it's athletic conferences that determine if you can play 2 sports at one time. The IHSA does allow students to play 2 sports at one time. And as the presiding superintendent this year of the SWSC conference, I should know what the conference bylaw is on that, but I don't. I will tell you probably the most interesting conflict we will have is many of the sports are placed in the spring. That's when their club seasons are club boys soccer, club volleyball. So we might have quite a bit of competition with club sports.
You won't have overlap like baseball and football?
We won't, because the dates, if you just kind of take a look on page 14, the seasons end. So for example, the spring season that would include football is February 15th to May 1st. The summer season that includes baseball starts on May 3rd. So the IHSA is really trying to avoid that. A football player who plays baseball might not be able to attend the preseason camp.
But what about practice?
The seasons are entirely different, right? So that the starting
Don't
date.
they start practicing before that?
Not in this case. This is in every single sport. There's what's called a season limitation, and so the season limitation is that you cannot practice until May 3rd for baseball.
Okay.
Now they can have preseason camps, and it's always been the case that students who are multiple sport athletes have not been able to go to the preseason camp. But if you go a little bit further up on the fall, August 10th, that was the first day of practice for all of those students.
It seemed like when my kids were in school,
Yeah.
there was never in.
I think a lot of parents would say that even now. So Dr. McBride feels that all the time with my daughters. Okay. Page 16, something I think is very important to highlight. There's not a great deal that's new. Mrs. Cristofero is here, but on pages 16, 17, 18, and 19, we really break down remote learning. The only thing that's new here is we added for the hybrid model, we added the last name break. We also include here what would happen remote learning to support in-person learning, remote learning. On page 20, what will Thursday look like?
I have a question.
Yeah.
You left hybrid in because in case we have to flip back, we can flip back, you can just go
Right.
back to it?
Right.
Okay.
In case we have the opportunity to go back to that, I can't ever see Mrs. Johnson. Never say never, but it would be hard for me to imagine this year that we would go back to full in-person learning for every student 5 days a week.
I was just curious why you left it all through.
Right. Because, so that the board would approve it as a tool, as a potential tool to use. To Mrs. Cooper's point, probably the most common feedback that we received today was how ecstatic teachers were to see students and to humanly interact with students. And so just like today and tomorrow, we're using in-person learning to set up the next stage. We might come out of that remote learning to reconnect with kids safely to set up the next stage. Interesting enough, I'm spying up these 2 days because what you might see is 2 days really work well under the IDPH guidelines. I don't have a terminus date here, although I did put in the plan that by September 11th, working with our union, working with you, working with our administrators, 2 days work very well for the IDPH guidelines in hybrid. We might select in 3 weeks or 4 weeks for a variety of different reasons to say, let's do 2 days again. Let's get our bus drivers in, let's bring those kids in, reconnect personally with students, and then move on. Because the 2 day shot really helps us navigate those IDPH guidelines.
You don't think that's gonna cause issues with the kids with a constant change?
I don't think you would make it constant. You wouldn't want to make it erratic either. The experience that we, had last year, and any number of people here could speak to this, is that there was serious remote learning fatigue. And in the work that a number of us, Dr. Greenan, Mrs. Cristofero, Mrs. Cooper, our Wednesday group that we met with, about 20 students, by the end they would say things like, all we want to do is get back into school. And I think our teachers might need a remote learning break. So if you can use, 4 weeks out, we'll have to talk about 3 weeks out, you do a 2-day shot where you come in, you check in, you reset. That might be a strong possibility. That's a lot of talk, a lot of things would have to be discussed, so that's why that tool is still in there. And I would strongly recommend it. Remote learning by itself, the whole idea of a hybrid is you're using both in-person and remote. You're using both of those tools really to influence learning. It can be a very powerful thing. And I don't know if there's any, other colleagues that, please jump in if you're great. Page 21 is the full online option for families that's suggested. We are asking families, we delayed the start of their school
Can we go
year.
back?
Oh yeah, of course.
You have, at the end of the day, you've got intervention time, the RLC time,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got the kitchen table and tutoring time.
Mm-hmm.
So if we in remote mode, how would that work for intervention and kitchen table too?
Yeah, last year we did interventions and we did kitchen table remotely. We had students, the kitchen table teachers who worked from 3 to 4, just used Google Meet and got right on with their students and did tutoring and worked through tutoring type issues. If you were struggling with an English paper, a math problem, they worked through it.
So it seemed the kids were open and.
I probably would not say, Mrs. Johnson, that last spring was a good litmus test,
Mhm.
because across the nation, so many students just faded away from remote learning for a whole variety of reasons, I think. One of which I think is they had no in-person connection, and over time, that really eroded their relationships, not in a negative way, just in a we all thrive on seeing each other way. That's another reason why one of the things that we've learned about full remote is remote learning connection time. A very important lesson we learned was setting time aside to deal with all of the communication that you have to have in remote learning. Because when you meet remotely, there's the meeting or the teaching, but then there's a whole second life of email and phone call that's generated that was very difficult for our teachers to keep pace with that volume and to be responsive to students because we had never really set aside time for that. So we have remote learning connection. Mr. Dusterhoff was good enough to work through over the summer. We have an app that I was talking to Dr. Shaw about today called Jabber, which will allow a teacher's cell phone to become their desk phone, basically, to increase that kind of phone conversation with students. So building in that time to connect with students. Also, we might have talked about this at one point, but in some of the time slots that we have of bringing students here for in-person intervention, we intend to be somewhat relentless about students who seem to drop off, and we have our own busing. We have some time set aside. We have that opportunity, and we can bring small groups of students in and follow every guideline in our plan of the CDC and the IDPH. That's a great question.
So Dr. McBride, if I can ask Mrs. Cooper a question, because
Sure
I
you
really
can.
want to address one of the things that she stated, that you guys focused a lot of time on the hybrid method, right? And you really didn't focus enough time on the remote learning side of this. Are you prepared to go remote learning? Or do you need another week?
Well,
And I'm
we did
sorry to
some
st-
remote learning in the spring, so we have some background from that. I think that in some cases, when people were planning for hybrid, they were planning for remote in the background of it, because you still had kids that you were not seeing and that you were kind of working with remotely in those conditions. So, it's nerve-wracking regardless. Having a work day on Wednesday will be helpful. We would probably beg for all the time in the world, and it would still be just full of anxiety. And so, we're as prepared, I think, as we can be at this point in time. It's probably my best answer for that.
And I don't know, Mrs. Christopher, if you want to be at the table, or,
Sure.
A few things that I think are important to mention. We did, you might recall from last month and Mrs. Christophero's presentation. So remote learning has always been part of this plan.
Right.
It's never not been part of
Correct.
the plan. And you might recall Mrs. Christopher did a pretty lengthy description of a whole committee that worked on that. I think critical to that was we provided every staff member with 6 hours of preparation time. So that was critical. We haven't ever before approved summer curriculum for every staff member.
Right.
So I don't know if there are some points of that, Mrs. Christopher, you want to share about the preparation, your committee work.
So with the CARES Act money that Mr. McBride was just referring to, we're getting ready and working to release a spreadsheet document, because we asked all teachers to submit as part of their work, what did you do in the traditional model? And then what does that look like in the hybrid and or the remote learning world? They didn't necessarily have to fill out both these columns, but many did. So I think that'll be another resource. I would also highlight, Karen, I can't remember when you said this, so I don't know if it's in a committee meeting or if you said it in here. But yeah, we were together a lot. That teachers are going to get better with practice. So she just spoke about, we did this in the spring, and it was mostly asynchronous, meaning teachers loaded things on, kids got on when they wanted to, and now it's going to be totally different, because students are expected to log on at the beginning of a class period. Teachers are going to take attendance like they normally would in the classroom. Teachers are going to be live to give explicit instruction. Sorry, my mask keeps falling. Explicit instruction about how do you navigate Google Classroom? What are the expectations in this class period? And then there's a lot of technology tools that they had success with in the spring that they can bring up and use. Two that our teachers got really skilled with were Edpuzzle and Flipgrid. We know a lot of teachers did that. Delta Math, our math teachers were working on. So we know they have some tools that they know to go use and do, but we expanded the time also because many of our teachers have experienced Zoom meets where there are automated breakout rooms, and all of our teachers know the heightened achievement when students are able to break out in those groups and do some small group work. So we are, our instructional technology specialists have just built an information sheet. How do you do this with Google Meet? It's not as quick as Zoom and one button, but I know they'll learn it and they'll do it and they'll be successful with it. And we also are keeping tabs of where Google is going, and Google has released, just today I found out that October is their date that they should have something comparable to the Zoom breakout rooms. So I believe our teachers, for sure, without a doubt. I was on the phone with a mom today who was just raving about how awesome our teachers are. So Karen's talked about it. We have very hardworking teachers who know their craft, who know how to reach students. And so they learned a lot about technology in the spring, and they've had some time to think about it given their work with the CARES Act, also the work we did with Paul Farmer earlier this week, because we really talked about narrowing what are the standards, what do we need to teach, because there's no way you're going to get through all the curriculum. And so, like Mrs. Cooper said, the more they practice, the better they're going to get in remote learning 3.0. So I have confidence for all the reasons that Karen said, and then some additional.
I mean, summer
Yes.
school, there were some really good positive successes of people that were working synchronously with students, so.
Yeah, that's my question. For you guys to be successful, have you tested enough, I guess? Do you feel comfortable enough to make sure that you're successful so the kids are successful? And that's the whole concern from my perspective as a board member, just for you too. I mean, we flipped quick.
Yeah.
And
So
we're flipping
there's
these
a little
kids and we're
anxiety
flipping our
out
district,
there.
right.
There is.
So that extra week, of taking the time, of preparing the teachers so that you can prepare the students. I'm just curious if we're we're running too fast. And as a board member, I've been thinking about this for the last 24 hours after having a conversation with Dr. McBride, just thinking, maybe we need to wait one more week and just think about getting you guys even more prepared so that those kids are prepared. Just food for thought.
I would just add one other thing too. I think a huge shout out to Kate Fahey and Pat Dean. Anytime we've heard a need from our staff, they are on top of it. So again, with this Google Meet, we got feedback. We need to know how to do breakout rooms there. They've created the sheet that'll be ready to go for our staff when they're working on Wednesday with their PLC teams and with their departments.
Good. Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
So the teachers will be on site?
The teachers do not have to be on site on Wednesday.
For
They
the
can
remote
work
learning planning
remotely.
day.
Yeah,
What?
For the remote learning planning day on Wednesday.
yeah.
Oh, when we start class. The remote class with the kids, they'll be on site, right?
It's Thursday and Friday.
On Thursday and
this week.
Friday, they're gonna start out on site. Yeah,
Okay.
you're right. Yep, yep. There's just so much to work out and access to resources. Matt Dusterhoff just kind of getting that good start.
But going forward after Thursday and Friday, they're not gonna be here.
We have to discuss that yet,
Okay.
and I communicated that, just maybe reminding board members, earlier communication. That's something we have to discuss.
Okay.
Other questions for Mrs. Christofaro?
I did read a Twitter, or I read an article yesterday by ASCD, and it made me think of it was about teachers, right? I used the analogy, we Apollo 13'd it, right, for the end of the school year, but now this analogy was, we're gonna Sully it, like Sully who landed the plane, right? He used all his background knowledge, all his years of experience
Yep.
to build and draw and be
Good idea.
successful.
Can we minus the crash,
No crash.
And let's not get
Everybody
wet.
was safe.
Can we not get wet? That's, it's the Hudson's not the cleanest. So, thank you, Mrs. Christofaro. And then just page 21, if board members would really like to look at this, this is a brand new page. This is the full online learning option. I think there's a number of important things here. One, to your point, Mrs. Bickus, when families said to us that they wanted a fully remote, fully online option, we wanted to guarantee that once they got in that they had a few things. One, they had a proven online option, something that had been tested, not something that we had just, said, this looks good.
Right.
We've been using Apex for years. I've used Apex for years. We wanted something that was multifaceted. Apex offers advanced placement. It offers honors. It offers NCAA accredited. Very unusual for online classes to be approved for NCAA credit. We wanted something that if they selected that and they had just concerns about being in the building, that it wouldn't whiplash them around, where they would experience remote, but then we're going back in, and that wasn't their wish. And as a result, what we asked all families interested in Apex, in this provider, and it's important to remember that the model with Apex that we picked was with our staff. We are not sending these students off to work with Apex staff. They are staying, their case managers, the teachers overseeing their work will be our staff. We did ask them to commit for a semester because if we're going to properly staff this and pay the tuition,
That's right.
we have to do that in a timely fashion. It isn't a situation where we can create the staff as we've already done, pay the tuition, and then even this week dissolve the program. Those would have been funds that the board had already spent and people the board would have already hired.
Right.
So we asked a semester, to your question, Mrs. Johnson, and we'll reassess it and come back to everybody about this option for second semester. It's monitored by LTHS students. Based on feedback from the board, limiting outside of school activities, that was strong feedback from the board. We asked for the number 3, the full commitment to the semester. We did share with families certain online coursework full online coursework just doesn't align with some of the things that we teach. We have electives, like the area that Mrs. Kishline is from, that there are some things that she does that cannot be, and she knows this going into remote, cannot be fully replicated. Mrs. Cooper is a math teacher. We teach integrated math, so we integrate geometry concepts, algebra, advanced algebra concepts. In Apex, some of those have to be broken out into a course in Algebra 1, a course in geometry. So we just wanted families to be aware that it's not that you won't get an experience, it just won't be, it'll be similar, not same, in essence. Courses will count in a student's GPA. NCAA accreditation is available. Counselors will work with students to verify what they need in their transcript. They'll be required to continue meeting LTHS graduation requirements. They will not. No student enrolling will be charged any kind of tuition or fee that they did not know. So let me just pause there if there's a question about that full option. Few last things before we just wrap up with general questions. On 22, this is not new, but I did want to draw the board's attention to, in July, we did commit to, there are several bullet points in the middle of that page that really we committed to following the CDC, following the IDPH, the ISBE. We had already made that commitment, and really part of our move to remote learning is to honor that commitment that we previously had already made. And then finally, the only other new thing is where you see on page 24, we added how do we determine to suspend in-person learning. And we used those procedures last week. In essence, these were not community factors that took place. There wasn't a change in the community. There actually hasn't really been a change, although you hear about an increase. The increase, in my opinion, covering it every day, looking at it right now. If you track sort of where we're at, for example, with our positivity rate, today we're lower than we were in April, May, parts of June. We did better in the beginning of June as a county. If you look at our infection rate, we're at levels that put us in orange, not in what the state uses as red. However, we did have a situation, as indicated here, where LTHS would revert to full remote learning if the IPHS determined, and IDPH, determined, and there's a determination there with new guidelines. So we're following suit with that to make that determination. And then obviously working with you as board members, working with our union, with our administrative team. So those are the changes to this. And then you do have the self-certification form. So let me just pause for additional questions.
I just need a point of clarification. I let you go through everything here to see if I was going to hear it. You talk about, when it comes to the special student populations, and you say some special education students come
Right.
4 days a week. Others, what determines who does and who doesn't?
Yeah, do you want to, Dr. Huntington, I don't know if you want to come up, it's maybe a little bit easier to hear you with the mic. That's a great question, Mr. Ives. As Dr. Huntington comes up, just to let the board know, there is the requirement that because we've gone in remote or hybrid or in person, students' individual education plans do not suddenly stop. Every inch of a student's IEP or a 504 plan or their English language learner services the district has to find a way to continue those. So that isn't suspended. But do you want to maybe take that's a great question.
Certainly. So we are working on individual remote learning plans for all the students with IEPs. Most of the case managers are working with parents directly. We want to attempt to serve those students remotely because we don't want to have a lot of students in the building because it's hard to, one of those kids comes in, they have a problem, then the whole classroom has to isolate. So we're working with certain programs. So we're looking at our students with the highest needs, and we're bringing those students in first. So right now, those are students in our CCC program and our students in the modified program. Most of the students in those programs have cognitive disabilities as well as like autism or other developmental delays.
Student across the street from me, I said, because he was in some of those programs. I said, "Oh, I think you're gonna be in there 4 days," and the mother said, "No, he's not," because he's not at that level. So
Yes.
I,
So we've
I
been-
misunderstood when I
That's
read
okay.
some things, so.
This weekend on
Tomorrow I'll
Saturday.
tell her why I was wrong.
After Friday, I talked to Dr. McBride, I talked to the teachers in the modified program and the CCC program, and we decided we wanted to move forward. So on Sunday morning, I sent a very detailed email to every student in the modified program, their parent, kind of explained what we were gonna do. I'm gonna have a town hall meeting for those families tomorrow night at 7. Would have done it today, but I thought I had to be here, so. So we'll have a town hall to go over those specific details. I can tell you that most of the families are very happy to be coming here for educational programming. We are not having lunch here in the building. We will send home any student that's eligible for free and reduced. We'll send home a lunch with them so they can eat when they get home. So that's pretty much where we're at right now.
How about the ACES program?
Yeah, so, I've got Hannah Wallace is co-teaching one of the sections, and then Mr. Kravitz and Mr. Dillard, they're kind of working together to come up with some plans. So unfortunately, we can't have the general ed student piece of it, but we can remote and Google Meet with them and do some of those activities, and so we're trying to build those in as well, because I will tell you that most of the parents are most disappointed about not having the ACES program to come to every day. The kids really look forward to it, so we're gonna try to meet the physical needs as well as the social emotional needs as well.
Can there be things outside the building?
So our Best Buddies program, as well as our Special Olympics Club, are doing a lot of virtual type of activities and meetings. They've been doing it all summer as well as in the spring. So kids that weren't even in Special Olympics Club were joining in to the Special Olympics Club because Mrs. Urbanski was like, yeah, come on, you can join us, so she's hoping to have, when we can come back and we have basketball, that maybe she's convinced a couple kids that you don't have to be a basketball star to play on her team, so, yeah.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I don't want to oversell any portion of this because it's one of the importances of sort of like the remote learning schedule here. There are a number of places in the remote learning schedule that support the possibility that there might be connections, right? And that is definitely something that we want to explore, want to be thoughtful about, want to take advantage of when students end their synchronous remote. Those are all possibilities that just haven't taken place quite yet in terms of what's possible. But that's a place like ACES where I think there is an amazing amount of things that could be possible.
I keep telling everybody, we're building this plane as we're flying it. So might not have the answer today, but we're gonna come up with a plan moving forward, so. Okay, thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
So I just have a couple questions in regards to the students' expectations to signing in. What about grades and assignments that are to be turned in timely at the end of I think it was June's board meeting, we learned that one student had 200 assignments and they turned in all at once. How are teachers gonna be able to have that type of accountability to have the students be accountable to themselves too? and
Right,
grading?
yeah, I don't recall a student who had 200 assignments, but not quite that much. But there were, I think what you were.
Maybe it was 290.
Yeah, you
or
bring
something.
up a really good point, Mrs. Bickus, because I think what you're referring to is our use of incompletes last year.
Yes, that's what it
We have a very different situation because another, not to accuse the state of Illinois of surprising us with things, but
Sure.
to accuse the state of Illinois of surprising us with things. One of the surprises on the high school level last year was a press conference, I believe it was March 20th, where we were told that we could not use the traditional grading structures we used. We could not
Right.
fail students.
Correct.
That's no longer in place. We are grading students. We've had some recommendations from our grading committee, which really are recommendations that we would be making anyway to move forward with grading for equity, mathematical accuracy, motivation, and trying to make as much of our, just as professionals, trying to make any of our assessments bias-free. But our traditional grading structures are in place short of some of the modifications that our grading committee made. So we have all of that at our disposal, and that's the expectation with students. So.
Great.
What about community service that the kids have to do? I know they-
Well, what about it,
beat me to
Mrs.
it.
Johnson? I believe that graduation requirements are the job of the board. The board voted only last year, and we do,
Reluctantly.
reluctantly, that, I think that's key for the public to know, because I'm
Yes,
sure that you
reluctantly.
reluctantly. So you only voted to waive it for the class of 2020.
That's right.
And, once we get through this, there is, Mrs. Christofero and I did look into a kind of a tracking that we might bring to you. There is a cost to it, but it's a very fine product that helps kids log and track. And one of our goals this year is to avoid the March flood. We just
Sure.
can't get to a point where we have 600 students, 600 seniors who have not completed
40
their requirement. And so we'll be more aggressive about that this year and getting that word out, but also getting more aggressive all the way down the line. I think one of the things I discovered is we just need more reminders all the way down the line to students. They're just, in a busy, large school district, that's easy, but it is a graduation requirement. It is our responsibility. We would never, if we have math graduation requirements, our math teachers would be mortified if we as a district weren't keeping track of their math graduation requirements, right? So we have to do better, and we will. Because I don't think this Board of Education, unless there's something that I'm not seeing and I'm not that smart, is going to waive that requirement for the class of 2021. I'm not asking you to vote on that right now, but you don't have to do anything because you already have that in policy.
I think that needs to be made known to those that are coming up for graduation.
Yes, ma'am.
Because they got a whole year
Right.
to get it out the way.
Right. This might be the point where I look in the camera and say,
Yes,
class of 2021, you need to get your community service.
40 hours.
That's right.
40 hours. That's true.
Mm.
If there aren't any other questions, I know this is a very long resolution. There's no requirement, because it is online, for Mrs. Kneva to exhaust her lungs. You can vote on the resolution without reading it aloud unless it's a 2-pager. It is online, so it's properly posted and you have it.
All right. So all I need then is approval for this resolution affirming the Lockport Township High School District 205 return to school transition plan for the 2020-2021 school year.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been motioned by Dr. Shaw, second by Mr. Ives. All right, roll call.
Dr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Lewandowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Bickus,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Ives,
Yes.
Mrs. Lopez Caniva.
Yes. All right, next we have the approval of the 2020-2021 calendar revisions.
In the way that we handle this, you might recall, last year I formed a fairly large calendar committee and we looked at the calendar from a variety of different points of view. Over the summer, we learned that we would have to make some calendar modifications due to some things that we received from the state of Illinois. Namely, we did a lot of investigation about November 3rd, which is Election Day. And can that be a remote learning day? Can that be optional? It is a requirement. It is a one-time only state holiday that we must take a state holiday. Our employees must not be required to work, much like Columbus Day, Labor Day, Memorial Day, etc. So we made a variety of different shifts along those lines. I'll point out the shifts that we made. The remote learning planning day, we did add that for Wednesday, August 19th. To your point, Mrs. Bickus, about teacher preparation to go remote. We can use 5 of those. We've placed 2 here now, early in the year. We just don't want to use all of them because there might be future needs that come up. The intent of those days really is for teacher planning and preparation. We've asked all of our teacher teams to meet. It's not necessarily a day of administrative meetings. It's not a day of administrative You'll see curriculum night at Easton Central. That will be by technology. The guidelines, whether we're in hybrid or we're in remote, do ask us to try to use technology to connect with families, to minimize visitors, to minimize parents, other large groups in the building. Labor Day, we placed another remote learning planning day. We felt after about 3 weeks that would be well placed for our teachers. Then really, there's not too much changing. Where did we swap out November 3rd? Traditionally, if you look at parent-teacher conferences on Thursday, October 8th, typically the next day is a day of non-attendance. That would be Thursday, October 9th. We will have attendance that day, remotely or in person, in order to compensate for November 3rd. We had to find some holiday, and as we worked with our union, we felt that that was the best holiday to sort of swap out. You can see some other dates. That's one change. We added the state holiday for Election Day. Everything else is similar. There is one change I am recommending to the board. In order to regain instructional days in this very strange time we're in, we had a committee recommend that we don't hold traditional final exam days. That doesn't mean that we don't have end of course or summative assessments, but that traditional schedule that we have of blocks of time for final exams, that we could recoup those days. Because of that, I became concerned. You might recall our previous calendar had us in school taking exams on Monday, December 21st and Tuesday, December 22nd. I am concerned that without the exams, we might see many families call in sick, not appear in teachers' lessons. All of our feeder districts get out on Friday, December 18th as well. So I saw an opportunity to align with our feeder districts and exit on a Friday, as we customarily do, and then return on Monday, January 4th. So that's the most substantial modification, but it really just brings us back to really a traditional 2-week break that begins on a Friday, and teachers return on a Monday and Tuesday, students on a Wednesday. So I just wanted to highlight that. Really no other changes to this. Some of the movement here does bring our final day of school to Wednesday, May 26th. I included in this calendar emergency days, but in a moment, Mrs. Cristofero will share why we hope those are not needed. And we'll walk through that. Any questions about this modification?
Are we gonna be a polling site? No?
We are not planning on being a polling site, Ms.
There might
Johnson.
not
The
be-
county has not asked.
There may not be many polling sites, it's all in the mail.
Yeah, the county hasn't made that request, so, no.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, just need a motion for the approval of this 2020-21 calendar revision.
I move.
All right, it's been motion by Ms. Johnson. I'll second that. Okay, roll call.
Mr. Lewandowski. Yes. Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Ives.
Yes.
Dr. Shaw.
Yes.
Mrs. Bickus.
Yes.
Mrs. Lopez Caniva.
Yes. All right, next we have another action consideration is the LTHS Emergency E-Learning Plan.
Yeah, Mrs. Christopher will take you through. This can be somewhat confusing because you might have thought that 2 items ago, didn't we just approve an e-learning plan? But I'll let Mrs. Cristofero explain what we would like to submit to the Regional Office of Education.
So this is something we saw many districts in the state start to tackle last year with creating plans for emergency e-learning should there be a snow day or cold day, as you know what we saw the year previous to that in terms of the accumulation of cold days. So we did opt last year. We thought, let's sit by and see how it goes, and then we got thrown into it with everybody else, and obviously we feel like we're pretty good at doing e-learning, and especially just one day. So that's what this is kind of the
cause for, it's for one day. It's certainly not for the shift we just had to make. It would be if we were in a traditional schedule and there was a snow day, or there was some kind of electrical down, that we could say, okay, we're just gonna use our plan. Basically, the plan is students will know, some of our students experienced it today, there's a way that they go into Infinite Campus and register their attendance, then they would get on Google Classroom for asynchronous lessons, so teachers would post their lessons, students would engage in the lessons. Many of the types of lessons might be review or practice or enrichment kinds of activities. I don't know what other questions you might have.
This is a requirement that Will County and the state makes if you're going to substitute electronic instruction for an emergency day, a school closure day. So they still are requiring this, although it might be a requirement they see go by the wayside. So they do require us to put the emergency days on our calendar, and if we want to substitute e-learning, we have to, post this application.
And it's for,
I hope I'm getting better.
it's for a term of 3 years too,
Right, so you're approving 3 years. Yeah, thank you.
I think I was the one saying, well, if we got remote learning, why do we need e-learning?
right, now you know.
It's
And
honestly-
actually, the state, we had to fill out this form last year right away when we kind of went to closure, and then I'm calling the ROE like, do we have to do that again now? Because we already, but we do for this purpose.
Thank you.
Okay, just need that emotion.
So moved.
Second?
All right, it's been motioned by Mr. Ives and second by Dr. Shaw. All right, roll call.
Mr. Ives,
Yes.
Dr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mrs. Bickus,
Yes.
Mr. Lewandowski. Yes. Mrs. Johnson,
Yeah.
Mrs. Lopez Caniva.
Yes. All right, next we have the press. First
All right.
request.
Well, Friends of Press, always very busy. This is a public reading. And I apologize, we usually put the slides up on the screen. But our LED, we came in this morning, our LED screen was not doing what it was supposed to. So if you look at your agenda, you will see of all the attachments that you have, one that says Press 104 Slides. And if you double click on that, that should open up and you should see a document in maroon and white that will lead you through. These are very minor changes. There's a couple of important things in here. It's not the 50 policies we had in Press 103, thank goodness. So if everybody feels they're there, I will scroll you through just a first reading and answer board member questions. The first change in policy is to 2:220. This amends our policy to come up to date with all the Open Meetings Act changes to allow live streaming, remote board meetings, all of the things that have happened in COVID-19. It speaks to, it amends some of the physical presence required for a quorum in terms of a member joining us remotely and how that counts towards a quorum. 4:180, pandemic, it has added COVID-19. Previously, this policy only spoke to H1N1 flu. So it's added COVID-19 and how it affects school operations. Basically all the things, it puts into policy all the things that you've heard this evening. Oops, sorry, I'm a little cut off on your slide there. 7:40. It basically clarifies the attendance expectations of part-time students. If a student is a non-public student at a private school, a student is homeschooled, a student who is disabled at a private residential facility but wants to attend here as well and be part-time, what it does is it clarifies what those students need to do to participate in extracurriculars and what a part-time student is. In essence, they have to be half-time at least. And some updated footnotes. 7:190, Dr. Huntington could speak specifically to this. This is both for special ed, primarily comes out of a lawsuit in Chicago first dealt with special education populations, but then really spoke to all populations. What it does is it updates our student behavior policy so that schools may not use isolation, timeout, or any kind of physical restraint for disciplinary punishment. We do have students who need isolation as a sensory technique, as a teaching technique, a learning technique. We might have a student, a regular ed or any student, who might be acting in a violent behavior that needs to be restrained, and that would, or restrained in a situation where their behavior might harm others. But to specifically determine that isolation or timeout or physical restraint is going to be part of a disciplinary consequence, that it is not allowed in this policy. Student records, this was updated to match changes in the Student Records Act that does allow the school to disclose without parent consent permission to send official records to a school where the student is attempting to enroll. Basically what this cleans up is oftentimes when students were moving from one school to another, it was all very clear that the parents were moving to that school in Georgia or down the road, that without securing explicit parent permission, the records of that student were held up, and because they were held up, it was difficult for that student to enroll. So this updates that. Use of educational technology, student data privacy and security. We've discussed this in the board's recommendation to purchase additional cyber insurance. This is a new policy. It's entirely new in the state. It was created to require districts to take a number of actions to protect online student data and how that data is shared. So a really good and personal identifiable information, PII. For example, we already have this in place. We're a G Suite school. We work with Google. We already have an agreement with Google that it cannot disclose inappropriately student information that it collects on our students. Same with Infinite Campus. Infinite Campus is our student information management system. It cannot disclose, it has to have security protocols in place to protect our students' data. So any operator that we sign on with would have to demonstrate that it has those appropriate protections in place in order for us to provide them any kind of personal identifiable information. Those are the policy updates. Any questions, thoughts, reactions? We would, it's our first reading. We would come back to vote on these next month. Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're
All right,
welcome.
let's see. All right, next, all right. All right, public comments on topics not listed on the agenda. A designated portion of the board meeting is set aside to hear comments on topics not listed on the agenda. A person wishing to speak must sign in and provide all information requested on the sign-in sheet, including the topic they will be addressing. The board president will call speakers up by name, announcing their time to comment. A time limit of 5 minutes per speaker per agenda topic will be imposed. The purpose of requesting such information on the sign-in sheet is to obtain the correct spelling of the name of the speaker and contact information, which will be used for any necessary board follow-up, and there is none. All right. All right, now going into the information report, principal's report.
And we like to say, just as Dr. Greenan approaches, or Dr. Green, that in social distancing, we try to stay 1 green and apart. So if you can just stay 1 green apart, and if you have to, 1 green apart. It works.
Hi,
I did
good
see
evening.
your videos.
I'm sorry?
I did see both your videos.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
great.
So it's very,
They were very good.
very good.
Thank you, thank you. So good evening, everyone. I wanted to begin with talking a little bit about the summer with summer school and our athletics program. Dr. Green then is going to talk about freshman orientation and her first day at Central Campus today, and then kick it back to me for Welcome Back Days discussion, as well as our first day today here at East Campus. So as was mentioned a couple different times in the board meeting previously this evening, we had a great summer, beginning with summer school. Yet again, teachers had to shift a different format of teaching, and they did a great job. Just at the end of last school year, they had our first session, summer school teachers had a week to prepare for a different model of teaching, that being more live, synchronous teaching, remotely for our first session of summer school, and then we had our second session as well, and our teachers did a great job. And I also want to commend our summer school coordinators, retired Dean Stacy McLaughlin, as well as Ryan Russell and Jason Osbold, who did a really good job of working with the teachers to figure out the best type of attendance check-in as well. And so that was important, and as it was mentioned a couple times this evening, we had a good opportunity to practice a little bit there in the summer. And then athletics, I really want to thank Mike Dwyer, our Director of Athletics, who just did a great job of updating us with the IHSA regulations, the latest news and information, working together as a team, and then Mr. Dwyer communicating with the coaches and the coaches communicating to the players. As Dr. McBride mentioned earlier, we had nearly 800 athletes come through this summer, and again, it was another opportunity for us to go through the health and safety guidelines. So with summer school, we had nearly 700 students between the two sessions. As you can see, 96% of them earned credit, so we were very pleased with how the summer went. And we got a little surprise in the summer, which was nice. We found out late in June that we were able to have a behind-the-wheel session in July. So that was nice to be able to get those kids an opportunity to get behind-the-wheel instruction. And again, sure. So they required one less driver. And prior to entering the car, we did the temperature checks, and then they had one less person in the car. So they had 2 drivers and 1 instructor. There was not a shield in between.
Yeah, they were masked.
But they were masked. They were masked, and as much as possible, we talked about promoting social distancing, washing and sanitizing hands as well. Mm-hmm. So we ended up having a very nice summer. So I'm going to have Dr. Green now talk a little bit about the freshman orientation and her first day today.
Yes, so on August 4th and 5th, we actually held our orientation days for the class of 2024. And out of the 1,020 families that we had registered, we had 916 families actually attend the event. So we thought it was a great event. They actually came in, they were pick up their schedules, take their yearbook, ID pictures, pick up their Chromebooks. And instead of having them sit in the auditorium as we usually do, I emailed out that day an orientation podcast that kind of went through the entire packet, kind of explained things to them, showed them a map of the school. We did have some families who went through the building. Some families did not. We did not want any congregating. So the families that asked did walk through, and some families just gathered their stuff and thanked us and went on their way. And the following week, we had approximately another 60 families come through that could not attend. So they actually came into the building and met with our registrar and were able to gain all of their materials that they needed throughout the process. So we were very excited about that. And like I said, as of the 12th, we had 1,020 students on the books, but we've creeped up a little here. We've had some families show up over the past week. So we're trying to mitigate that and figure out classes for them. But today went really well. Today showed that we had a wonderful hybrid plan. And that was great planning by our assistant principals, by Bill Thompson, our custodial staff. The amount of hours that they put into planning and prepping this was unbelievable. And so we were very excited about the hybrid plan. Today showed it was phenomenal. And as you can imagine, we were very disappointed that we had to switch over to the full remote, but we understand with those guidelines, sustaining that would be very difficult. But just with the switch, I want to really thank Eric Slager, who has been a phenomenal addition to our staff. John and I actually had videos set and ready to go with the deans, and Friday we had to go to Eric and say, all right, let's start over. We got to scrap that. We got to redo the intro and the ending, and Eric was phenomenal. I worked with him Friday afternoon. He had him out to us Friday evening, and we were able to get that out to our kids. So what a great resource he has been for us to be able to communicate with our families and produce these videos to help just notify people of what's taking place. So we wanted to thank him. Today was awesome, and we had half of the freshman class show up. And they showed up with their IDs, and we were outside taking temperatures. We did not have one temperature at Central Campus today, which was phenomenal. Our attendance was great. We were still trying to figure out how to gauge the online. We had some kids, their freshman year, still struggle a little bit with logging in, but we were able to mitigate some of that thanks to Matt and the technology department. But we had great attendance. The students and the staff were very excited. I had a lot of students coming up and asking, so when can we come back? And I said, hopefully soon, hopefully real soon. So we were really excited about that. They, a lot of great activities taking place in the classroom, a lot of connection activities, getting to know you, interacting. Our teachers were full of energy today, which was awesome to see. They were really engaging, a lot of great activities, and then making sure that the kids understood how to get onto Google Classroom and the expectations that were needed. So we felt very good about that. Our study hall and cafeteria procedures, you know, it was a great idea, in addition, by the union and Dr. McBride, to have us go that first week without food, because we were able to kind of figure out the procedures before we introduced food into the situation. So hopefully when we go back hybrid, we now know. And just with anything else, you know, there's always front loading when you have new students in a building or when you start a new year. So we know that it took time, but we were very happy and very impressed with how smooth things went today. We know that there's still some things we need to work on with kids. Like, they were so excited to see each other, you know, trying to remind them, hey guys, we want you to be back here, stay 6 feet apart. And, you know, they wanted to talk to each other and real excited to see each other. But it was just great interaction between the staff and the students. And our dismissal process was just like any first day of school. A lot of freshmen trying to figure out where to find their bus. But it was smooth as well. We only had one kid miss his bus, but it wasn't an issue. Mom was able to come pick him up. So we were very excited to meet the first half today, and really excited to meet the second half tomorrow. The staff was really excited and said, this is, like Karen said, this is the best day having kids back, and it brought back a little sense of normalcy. So hopefully we're able to do that again soon.
Did you have any mask issues?
We had no mask issues. Every once in a while you had a kid who, you know, would drop down, and I would say to them, hey, make sure you protect yourself. And they were very respectful and, you know, pulled it up immediately. But no, we had no one. I don't even think we gave out a mask today at Central. I was at the front door. Every kid showed up with a mask, and we only gave out 3 ID stickers today. 3 kids forgot their IDs. They were ready to go.
Yeah. In terms, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Luann.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was really good, yeah.
It was great.
In terms of welcome back days at East Campus, after Carrie and the Freshman Center had their 2 days, then we went on August 6th and 7th here at East Campus. Huge thank you to our assistant principals, Jen Webre, Matt Bartley, of course, Trish Sermon over at the Freshman Center, all the work that she did for freshman orientation, and then all of our staff who worked those days as well. Truly a great team effort, another opportunity for us to model wearing the mask, physical distancing, washing and sanitizing hands. At East Campus, we had, again, our numbers continue to increase each year. We had about 2,300 families prove residency online, which makes the process of welcome back days much more time efficient. And then even if they didn't prove residency online, we still had a very time efficient process of getting families through so that they could prove residency, get their schedule, get their ID, possibly look for their parking permit if they were a senior, or at least register or get that, an opportunity to talk to families if we needed to regarding student fees, and then giving families the opportunity to walk the building a little bit to get used to seeing some of the new one-way hallways that we have now. So it really was a great couple of days. And then I would echo much of what Carrie just said in terms of the first day of school today for our LTHS group. Having the opportunity to be in front of the school in the morning. We had a team of, and we increased our entrances here at East Campus from 2 to 4. So we used the CWC doors, our cafeteria doors, and then the 2 Farrell Road doors. So I was in front of the cafeteria, and each team in front of each entry, we had a staff member who was monitoring the buses to ensure that we didn't have too many coming off at the same time. And then we had, of course, staff members taking temperatures and then also making sure that they weren't getting too close to each other. We also had marks on the sidewalk actually taped off to ensure that. So we felt like that went really well. As Dr. McBride alluded to earlier, sure, there were some times where maybe we were getting a little bit too close, but we continue to vocally remind the students, let's try to be mindful of physical distancing as much as possible. During the passing periods, for the most part, it went smooth. Just a couple things too. Carrie and I thought it was really important. Carrie's used to getting in front of the freshmen on day one and giving her what's a Porter speech, and I know that was very difficult for her not to be able to do that today. Last year, as my first year as principal, I did a welcome video for the students before the first day, and we felt like we really still wanted to do our videos, and this just is another example of the great team that we had. So yesterday morning, I sent out my video the same way that I sent out a video every day during e-learning. And of course, there was a little bit of an issue. I got a couple emails back from students right away saying, hey, I can't click on the link. And I'm like, I just get out of church. I'm looking at my email, and I'm like, oh, this isn't good. So I call Janine Wheeler, and then I also get a hold of our student information manager, Kathleen Gallagher. I'm calling her at noon on a Sunday to try to go through what the issue might be in Infinite Campus. Within 15 minutes, she fixed it for me, and I was able to send it out again. So I just want to share that because, again, that's just another example of the team that we have. And oftentimes our work calls for hours beyond the normal workday. And just another example of the great team that we have here. So again, today was really a great day. I had the pleasure of talking to many teachers. I had the pleasure of talking to students they were happy to be here. I received some emails after the day from teachers, largely talking positive about how nice of an experience it was. So we're very much looking forward to tomorrow for our Porters group. And we're very much looking forward to having an opportunity to be able to get into our hybrid plan.
Yeah, these experiences that we've had throughout this really, brings us a sense of value, and it really makes us proud to be Porters, because the amount of work and dedication and people that are just willing to roll up their sleeves and dig in, whatever it takes to help our families, help our students, help our staff, it's been remarkable, and I am proud to be a part of this organization.
Any questions from the board?
How did the busing go? To pick up the buses arrived, the orderly coming off the bus. Did you have coordinators go on the bus and tell them what to do before they got off the bus? How did that work?
So we didn't actually have anyone go onto the bus. I would say that Dr. McBride's previous week's communication and including some video clips of the expectations of wearing masks and physical distancing and hand sanitizing certainly helped. Definitely a big thanks to Dave Needespall, because we've shortened the window of time our buses are arrived, and overall here at East today went largely well. We had some late buses, and we knew we were going to expect that a little bit. Plus there was more traffic in town because we definitely had more drop-offs from parents more than usual. But again, another opportunity tomorrow to go through that.
And to be honest, it wasn't out of the norm for the first day of school.
True.
The first day of school,
Yeah.
we always have some late buses because, the drivers are doing their routes, kids and parents are getting used to things.
Take a little longer.
It was the norm for a first day of school.
And Dave did a great job. He had all the bus drivers over at Central for their Institute Day, an incredible amount of training. And I have to say, I boarded almost every bus here at East. And bus drivers are doing these, incredibly cagey things with their contact tracing and how they were getting kids' names, and they were doing a lot of the onboard training of students. So I really think we have to give a shout out to our bus drivers, just very impressive.
Yes.
Their attention, to that as well. One other mention, I just want to compliment our two principals. Something they certainly didn't forget is our conversation as a board about fees. And one of the things I think I've learned is just constantly reminding people. So in a very dignified way throughout welcome back days and freshman orientation, oh, hi, we had a station, kind of separated off. Hey, oh, well, you paid your fees, great, thank you very much. Oh, hey. And, Dr. Green shared with me how many parents, oftentimes when it's an electronic world, when just that reminder begins a culture of, hey, let's remind you every year, and I really appreciate them setting that up. And being sure to, just help out with that and just remind parents that it's a great chance to advertise what you do as a board of having one fee that covers it all. And I just have to tell you, that's almost unheard of in public schools, all over the place. I think it's very egalitarian and very, very democratic, and it's a nice chance to remind of that. And we do have to give a shout out, a very wise hire by the Board of Education, because Eric has, in a very short amount of time, developed so many things that is communicated, our staff landing page, our web page, if you take a look at how that's operating and working, live streaming this, just brought his ingenuity and talent, to our district, which we're very lucky to have.
Did we have to add any buses?
We did not. We
No,
didn't have any.
actually,
Dave Neeswell, when I talked to him earlier today, said that they had 2 extra buses just kind of hanging out in a couple of the areas that they thought they might need extra, and they did not need them.
Okay.
Yeah, it was support buses.
Did the East students like Bill's new floor?
Oh, a lot of compliments, especially during welcome back days, yes, yes.
I will say, even my daughter as a freshman, you know, she's spent many hours in that building with me. She walked in and looked at me and goes, "Whoa, what's this?" And I said, "It looks pretty nice, doesn't it?" So she was very complimentary of,
Yeah.
Luxury vinyl tile.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
You know,
it's that
just
luxury.
composite vinyl tile,
Yes,
okay?
it looks great though.
Yeah,
It
and
looks
just,
great.
and just to walk the building to, you know, Bill Thompson and his staff, we cannot thank them enough for their hard work. And I know it stung a little bit for Bill and his staff too, because so much work this summer was spent at doing everything at both buildings with signage and classrooms and the desks. And so we're hopeful and confident that we can shift back to our hybrid plan soon, but I really want to give Bill and everyone on his staff just a huge thank you for all the work that they did this summer. Both buildings are beautiful as always.
Yeah, as soon as we can go back, we are ready. We are ready.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Moving on to our information report.
Right to
You-
Bill.
Yes, you have your maintenance report there. If you have any questions.
And Mr. Thompson's
I'm
here, yay to lime stabilization.
Yeah.
So, you know, lime stabilization worked, it saved quite a bit of money, so I really appreciate, again, Bill working, you know, with our contractors to get that done. As you can see, kind of the theme here is, you know, not letting things rust. I mean, Bill and his staff have really worked diligently just to make sure that everything is not just in top-notch shape, but even beyond that. The pool is very much worth. It looks brand new. You know, we didn't dig a new pool, but just the environmental work there makes it look just outstanding. And I think it's so critical in a time like this. I believe sometimes what districts do is, in a time like this, we stop fixing, we stop spending, we let this go, we let that go. And then usually you double the cost or triple the cost later. So I appreciate Bill's staff getting at it, you know. And, you know, to echo what Dr. Green said, I think it does sting a little bit, because if you did a walk of both of our buildings, I don't know a district that is more physically prepared for COVID-19 than ours. So, anything for Bill?
Well, he mentions in his report that he's asking for our input on the adhesive down the asphalt down at the A field, whether or not we think it's a good idea to take
Right.
10 grand off and let his crew do it. I, for one, think it's a good idea. If you think it's a good idea, Bill.
I do. Just wanted you to be aware of it, because
Yeah,
it's such a big
maybe you asked in the question, but I personally think go for it.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, Bill, I'm sure your wheels are already turning as far as you were able to get pretty far ahead with things that were done this year since students were not in session. Are we still looking at things that we can do to get ahead as far as, I'm looking here and I see like two rooms at Central need to be tiled.
Yeah,
Do you think-
there's always something to do, so.
I'm sure. Especially at Central.
There's no such
We're
thing as
looking at the
getting
next
ahead.
few weeks as, you know, an opportunity again, you know, we're gonna be meeting this week and making some plans, what we're gonna be doing next, so, yeah, we're gonna try to take opportunity this time that we're afforded.
You know, what's not on here, because we correspond to the standards, but just, you know, what you might think is the most unglamorous part of maintenance is ventilation. And the work that Bill and his staff have done just to ensure that ventilation is in a place where it's as healthy, as filtered, as much fresh air as possible in this kind of pandemic time as possible. So, great job.
Yeah, I saw on the news today that in Chicago, they're gonna have to crack, in certain schools, crack the windows to keep them like that, you know, even in the wintertime.
Mhm.
So it makes you appreciate the ventilation.
Right, for sure. Thank you, Bill. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, the procurement card rebate. Oh,
Stephanie, you want to talk just briefly about that? In essence, the rebate we got from our procurement card. Anything to add, or any questions from board members?
Eight grand's good.
Yeah, right, so,
Yeah.
this is just additional funds based on changing the way we purchase. So, where we can, we use it, and gets us a rebate back, so.
That's good.
Keep up the good work, it's great.
Yes.
Well,
Okay. All right, capital project expenditure and interfund transfer summaries. Again, thank you, Stephanie, for that.
Yeah, these basically are transfers to cover the two major projects we
Mhm.
worked on, our parking lots and then finishing off the A
The A
fields.
field, yeah, and it's coming along. All right, thank you. Okay. All right, do I have a motion to enter into closed session to confidentially discuss litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting under Chapter 5 ILCS 120/2C11, and collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees, and that's under Chapter 5 ILCS 120/2C2.
So moved.
All right, it's been motioned by Mr. Ives and second by Dr. Shaw. Roll call.
Mrs. Bickus,
Yes.
Mr. Ives,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Dr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Lewandowski.
Yes.
Mrs. Lopez Caniva.
Yes. All right.
Can we take a 5-minute break?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, before we go into closed
And
session,
you
we'll
see
take a
members, if I could
5-minute
just talk to
break
you guys before
to
you
get,
take
just
off.
for